Okay, today's presentation is about blending and formulating with essential oils. I do apologise in advance. I get excited when I present and I sometimes talk a little fast. So if you need me to slow down, just kind of do this for me. I just can't help it, you know. Okay. In this session, I'm going to be taking you through essential oil chemistry, in particular the key differences between essential oil chemistry and fragrances. Who's formulated with essential oils before? Yeah, a few. Who wants to be formulating with essential oils more? All right, you're going to find this really relevant because I'm going to be talking through some of the issues you'll face, how you can overcome them, and some of the things that you just simply can't achieve with essential oils as well. So we'll go through all of this. I'll be looking at blending principles, usage rates, safety. Just because they're natural doesn't mean they're safe. So I'm going to go through a few points there. I'm also going to be taking you through some of the regulatory considerations and other considerations you need to make when formulating with essential oils. The very first thing I want to go through is the key differences when you're using essential oils compared to fragrances. So when you are making, who's ever made fragrances or who's ever been trained in fragrance composition? Yeah, a few people. So the key thing is a fragrance is a blend of 20 to 100 different aroma compounds. So if you can imagine 20 different chemicals, aroma compounds sitting on a shelf that get blended in a specific way to form a fragrance. Well, that's not the case with an essential oil because Mother Nature gives us an essential oil that's composed of multiple different aroma chemicals. So we don't actually blend them and put them in there. Not like a perfumer would. They purposely select and blend in various ratios and proportions. So when you're formulating with essential oils, that already poses some limitations and challenges. First of all, you can have seasonal variation. What Mother Nature grows this year is not necessarily the same as next year. Different rain, different weather, all sorts of other impacts that might impact different crops from time to time can then affect the actual aroma profile of your essential oil. It's not like a perfumer specifically measuring out isolated aroma compounds to give you the same result every single time. So that's one of the key differences. Also, it means that you can sometimes get unexpected incompatibilities with essential oils in your formula or when blending them. Again, they're composed of multiple aroma compounds that come that way from nature compared to a fragrance, a perfumer who is specifically blending or manipulating and knows which chemicals aren't necessarily compatible. So you need to bear that in mind as well. Fragrances are also generally more substantive. And because you can pick and choose what goes into a fragrance mixture, you can control the price a lot more. With essential oils, if you get a really low yield one year in a batch, the price suddenly becomes a lot higher, and that can impact your finished product. There's also generally lower substantivity with an essential oil compared to a fragrance, which means you often need to use more. So you're using more of a more expensive substance that's subject to yearly batch-to-batch yield, you can have a big impact on price. Also, your fragrances usually come with very strong antioxidants present, which means your fragrance will generally degrade less or in a more predictable manner than essential oils. Okay, essential oils need extra antioxidant added when you put them into a formula, and they will degrade over time, sometimes not always in a predictable manner. So fragrances are definitely easier to work with. They're more predictable because you're purposely getting a perfumer to blend, select aroma compounds in a very known way so that you can predict the outcome to a much greater extent. So as an example, just on the screen, I've got a Lily of the Valley base. This is a fragrance. So this is again showing you how the fragrance might be put together. And you can see all the individual aroma compounds, and they're measured out in specific amounts. And here, variants are created to make a slight difference in the aroma. So your perfumer might send you 3 versions. They vary slightly in their aroma, and you pick which you prefer. But your perfumer can purposely adjust inputs. This doesn't happen with an essential oil. I'll just flick forward quickly. I'll come back to that. But as an example, you can see this is the typical composition of lavender oil and orange oil. And see the range? So when lavender oil is tested against the standard, it needs to comply with these ranges. So 1 year, you might be at the lower input of, for instance, the linalool content, the linalool acetate. This can vary your fragrance from this year's batch to next year's batch quite significantly sometimes. I'll come back to this one in a moment. Okay, so essential oils also have top, middle and base notes, just like when you have a finished fragrance. But again, a perfumer will purposely select the aroma compounds to create the top, middle or base notes. With an essential oil, they generally have top, middle or base notes already in there. One oil has all 3 characteristics, but they generally have predominant top or middle or base notes. So you need to pick and choose your essential oils to combine those that are strong in top notes with those that are strong in middle notes with those that are strong in base notes to get a well-rounded and well-degrading aroma over time. Now, essential oils, as I've mentioned, will degrade over time, and they specifically lose their top notes reasonably quickly. We're talking 4 to 6 months. Even in a good formulation, you'll start to lose your top notes. So you need to help counter that. It will happen. The extent to which it happens will depend on the other oils used, antioxidants present, your base product, but it will alter the aroma profile. As I've mentioned, you can control that much better with a fragrance, whereas with an essential oil, the only real way to know how it's going to degrade is stability testing. And throw in there the added complexity of stability testing. You really can't accelerate it with aroma, because the minute you put it under accelerated conditions, you're going to cause a false degradation profile because they don't like heat. So it's very hard to predict how the aroma will degrade over time. It's something you just need to monitor over time. And with careful blending, you can plan for it. But what I really want to point out is that you need to be prepared for this to happen, because it will happen. The extent to which clever blending, you'll be able to control it to some extent, but never the way you can control it with a fragrance. Essential oils, as I've mentioned, are generally less substantive. So that means you need to use more. That means that in wash-off products, you'll need to either use significantly more or be prepared for less aroma on wash-off. So with a shampoo product, for example, it's really hard to get any lasting aroma when you're using essential oils compared to a fragrance. One of the challenges you need to overcome. You would need to purposely pick essential oils that have a higher substantivity. Okay, otherwise you just won't have any aroma when the product washes off if you're only using small amounts of essential oils by comparison to a fragrance. And as I mentioned, they're generally less stable than a fragrance as well. So when combining them, you need to understand the chemistry, you need to understand these issues, and then you can combine them quite effectively, but you need to be aware of these. Okay, so now let's have a look at essential oil chemistry. And I want to point out the 4 different types of essential oils that you can get in the marketplace. So you can get organic, you can get natural, you can get plant, and you can get nature identical. Does anyone know the difference in these 4 items? Okay, organic's pretty easy. We'll start with that one. Obviously, an organic essential oil, grown organically, certified organic, no pesticides. It is the real substance. So if we were talking lavender oil, for example, the supplier would have organic certification, they would use organic farming techniques, and that essential oil you obtain is pure organic lavender essential oil. Now, one of the issues that can happen, particularly with organic produce, it may then be a beautiful organic lavender, but it may not fit this profile. Now, if that happens, then they can sell it to you as an organic lavender oil, but it doesn't meet a standard. And that can happen in a particularly bad batch, really bad climate, other unfavorable growing conditions. You can have a lavender oil that doesn't meet the lavender standard. That can happen with an organic product. The next one, of course, is a natural essential oil. And this is basically an essential oil that's grown, that gets distilled. You've got the lavender oil. It's pure lavender oil. It doesn't meet an organic certifier's standards because it wasn't grown organically, but it's still 100% pure lavender oil. Okay? You don't tend to get as much variation as you do with organic. Again, organic you can't manipulate with fertilizers and things like that the way you can with a natural oil if you have poor growing conditions. Still needs to meet this profile to be considered a suitable lavender oil. Then we have plant-derived lavender oil. Now, this is where the lavender oil might take bits from the lavender oil, but it might be a little low in linalool acetate content, for example. So your supplier might add a little bit of linalool acetate that they get from a different plant. Okay, so for example, limonene, often they can get limonene from peppermint. So if they need to increase the limonene content, they might add a little bit of limonene from peppermint. It's still a pure plant oil, still an essential oil, but it's no longer 100% lavender oil. They're adding aroma compounds from other plants. Cineol, they usually get from eucalyptus, 3-octanone from peppermint, camphor from pine, linalool from hoewood, linalool acetate, petitgrain, and terpenine 4-ol from tea tree. So they can actually manipulate the profile of a lavender oil by adding in these components from other oils. Still considered natural, still all plant, but it's no longer 100% lavender oil. I've got the orange oil there also as an example. The orange terpenes or acetaldehyde can come from citrus sources, other citrus sources, not just orange oil. Alpha-pinene, beta-pinene, and myrcene can all come from pine. Linalool, again, from hoewood. And these are usually cheaper sources. So you'll find that your plant-derived essential oils that are not 100% substances will usually be cheaper than a 100%, and we'll pick lavender again, cheaper than a 100% lavender oil, because the 100% lavender oil is what it is. But you can still get a natural essential oil that meets this profile, and it can be called lavender oil because it meets this profile. It's going to be cheaper than 100% lavender oil. And then, of course, you can get nature identical. So you can get many of these chemicals, the limonene, cineol, 3-octanone, camphor, linalool, linalool acetate, terpen, 4-ol, all from synthetic sources. Chemically, they're these substances. And chemically, we can create most of the components of a lavender oil from a synthetic source. It is identical to what you get from nature, but it's synthetically sourced. Now, these are usually the cheapest type of essential oils that you can get using nature identical. So when you're looking at formulating with essential oils, speak with your supplier about what that material is. You don't want to get a nasty shock at the end and find out that you're using a nature identical substance just because you wanted the cheapest lavender oil you could get. So ask them, is it organic? Is it natural? Is it all from nature, but not necessarily 100% lavender oil or that particular oil that you're looking for? Or does it contain nature identical substances? Does that make sense for everyone, that it can be almost all synthetically sourced as long as it's nature identical to this profile? So just be aware of that. A lot of people don't realise this can happen. So if you see a lavender oil, for example, orange, or any essential oil that is priced too good to be true, it probably is. Just be aware of it. Okay, so now we're going to have a look at some blending principles. And the best way to get used to formulating and blending with essential oils is to simply play. That's the best way to do it. Now, I'm going to go through these blending principles, and so that everyone in the room has plenty of time, I'm going to start handing out some samples. You're going to have some limitations when you formulate with essential oils. For example, that nice fresh ocean breeze smell you can't create with essential oils. Now, if you're using a very clever perfume house, they might be able to provide you with a natural blend where they would actually take isolates or compounds from essential oils and put them together in a similar way that they can manipulate a fragrance to create you that. But it's no longer going to be a single essential oil that gives you that kind of aroma. So as I hand these out, first one I'm going to hand out is what I call Oriental. I'm going to hand out floral, fruity, and then a men's product. I want to talk you through that one when I hand that out. You're going to notice there's limitations in the type of aroma I could achieve. I've used 100% natural essential oils in my blending. Okay, so no nature identical components, and you're going to instantly recognise some of the limitations. You might smell them and go, oh, it hasn't quite hit this note. Okay, so, and that's usually just part of the limitations of blending with essential oils. The other thing when I hand these out, so here is the 100% aroma. So as I hand them out, I want you to have a sniff of this, and then this is product with it present, and I've written on the label how much of the essential oil is present. This is a very basic cream, nothing special about it at all, except that I've put the essential oil into it. So then I want you to see just how much the aroma alters when it's put into the base. Now the first couple I hand out, there's not a big difference. The men's product I'm going to hand out last because there is a massive difference. So I'm going to talk through that one when I do hand that out. But please take note of how it smells as the straight substance and then how it smells when it's diluted into the cream. Plenty of time to hand these around and have a smell. Okay, so also when you are smelling, try and capture some of the top, middle and base notes. You will notice when you apply the product and rub it in, you do pick up the base note a bit more as well. And the base, just worth mentioning, the base of your product can impact your essential oils. So I've made a very, very plain, ordinary base so that you could just smell the essential oil. But whenever you're formulating with essential oils, or fragrances for that matter, you always need to test them in the product, okay? Because they can alter depending on that base and the way they're applied. So when you're blending essential oils, you need to use a combination of top, middle, base notes. Remember, your essential oils, every single essential oil has top, middle and base notes. So you need to pick and choose ones. And I have a little list there. Don't worry about whipping out your phones. Give me a card after. I'll send you the presentation. You can read it much better on your computer screen. And you still bring out your phones. I'll send you a copy. There's some other pictures you might want to take too. Just let me have your card at the end. I'll email it out to you. Okay, so there's a little indication. These essential oils here, particularly strong in top notes. These ones particularly middle notes, and these ones base notes. So we need to pick and choose and use them in a certain combination to really maximise those top, middle, base notes. And the recommended inputs, these are recommendations. Obviously, it's going to depend on the particular materials you use. Top notes 20 to 30%, body notes 40 to 80, base notes 10 to 25%. Some essential oils have a relatively even profile. For example, Lang Lang, you will find has a relatively even profile, top, middle, base. That's also a very substantive one. So that gets used a lot in wash-off products, if you've ever noticed, because you do get some substantivity from that particular material. The example I've used here, lavender. Now this is how the aroma description is written, but it is predominantly a body note. So the herbaceous, lavender and floral notes are those that are generally picked up when you're working with a lavender. But, and again there's the summary, there are some major incompatibilities between the types of essential oils. Now let's hand the next one out so we can get that circulating. Okay, the aroma type. Now this is really, really important. From this table, and it goes on to the next page, we can see ticks, we can see a C, that means use with caution, and we can see an X, which means do not combine these two types of essential oils. So you might have looked at this list and gone, oh, well, that looks pretty easy. I'll just take something from here and something from here and something from here and I'm done. It doesn't work like that. Okay, because if you combine incompatible materials, you can get disaster. So for example, you could combine Lang Lang, which is a floral note, and also predominant in middle notes, but it does carry over to top and base as well. It is compatible with a green note. So you can see here, compatible with a green note, and a green note, for example, neroli. And we could combine it with a woody base note. It would also be compatible. And we would then pick a material that's going to provide us with that woody base note, for example, a cedar wood, and we would combine them. We would start with these relative proportions here. And then it is a matter of playing, adding a little more, seeing how it smells, adding a little more top note, adding a little more middle note, just playing around, seeing how it smells. Now already hopefully you've seen, as these samples come around, the product that's 100% material smells different when it gets added to the base. So even when you make a nice mixture and it smells great as 100% concentrate, it may not work out quite the way you wanted when you add it to your product. So very important you do that next step. You also need to make sure you maximise out at about 4 to 5 different types of essential oils. Otherwise you can get really strong incompatibilities that you may not have expected, or that degradation profile may be a little bit more susceptible to degrade or oxidise over time. Okay, I'm going to hand out the next one now. This is a fruity one. Now, as the fruity one comes around, what you'll notice straight away, it's not sweet like you would expect from most fruity fragrances. And that's because your aromas like those sweet berries just don't exist. Okay, they don't exist as an essential oil. So in this one, you'll smell a bit of a banana type aroma. That generally comes from the chamomile. From the oriental, you probably picked up the lemon myrtle and the geranium. We had a bit of myrrh in there as well, when that one comes around. The floral was predominant in Lang Lang, so that was the main middle note I used in that one. Now, next, I'm going to hand out the men's. Now, this is quite pungent. First of all, I'm going to hand out some aniseed. Now, when you first smell this, this is the face you're going to pull. Okay? I'm going to look for it. I'm going to know whoever's holding the aniseed, because this is the face. Okay? Really pungent. But then I've put it into a blend here, and you can still smell it. It's still quite predominant in here. And then I've put it into my very ordinary, basic base, and it suddenly smells a whole lot better. As this comes around, so I want you to notice how it diminishes in the base, and it actually helps carry the aroma. But you're also going to notice with this men's product, it really isn't quite there for the men's market. And I've done this purposely because I really want to emphasize that some aromas you just cannot achieve using pure essential oils. That's when you might need to speak to your fragrance house about using some essential oil components or isolates to make you something that's much more appealing to the market. So I'll hand this one out now, but be prepared, it is pungent. Now, another blending principle, extending. So some of these materials are not cheap, okay, particularly things like your rose absolutes. So you can extend them by using aromas or essential oils that have similar aroma profiles. For example, and if you are looking for a good textbook for essential oils, Salvatore Battaglia has written a fantastic book on essential oils. It's really a great go-to guide. I recommend you get that if you're going to be formulating with essential oils. And this is an example of how to extend rose that he's provided. Now, usage rates. So hopefully formulators in the room, straight away, you're looking at those usage rates and you're going, oh my God, that is so much more than using a fragrance. So again, I emphasize you're using more of more expensive materials with sometimes an unpredictable degradation profile. You carry more risk, okay? Be prepared for extra cost, and also that cost fluctuation, batch to batch or yield variation can have a big impact on price. Was it about, I think it was about 8 or 10 years ago, there was a whole East Indian sandalwood plantation that burnt down. Well, the Western Australia absolutely loved it because their Western Australian sandalwood sales went through the roof because the East Indian sandalwood tripled in price overnight. And it was already expensive, so it became too expensive to use in a lot of formulas. So the next closest replacement, and it is a different aroma, but the next closest replacement was Western Australian sandalwood, which also made that price increase because of supply and demand. So you need to be prepared for this, particularly with the more expensive essential oils. The rarer they are, the more they cost, and you can have significant price fluctuations. So you can see here straight away usage rates. In particular, I want to point out wash-off products. So when you're creating a foaming product for wash-off, you normally need to keep your lipid input quite low. Otherwise, you affect your foam and cleansing ability. Now, if you're putting essential oils into a foaming wash-off product, you're usually working with greener surfactants, which are normally harder to get a good cleaning and foaming profile. So you're getting these harder to use materials and you're putting a really high lipid content in there, which is going to further reduce your cleansing and foaming power. Can anyone see the formulation challenge you're setting for yourself? Also, when you wash the product off, it's generally less substantive. So you need to think carefully about the formulation techniques you're going to use to stabilise this much essential oil in a foaming product, and to make sure that your consumer's happy with the end performance and the end substantivity. So I'm pointing that one out in particular, but you do need to be aware that you're facing similar formulation challenges when you're using essential oils for all types. And again, you generally need to use antioxidant when formulating with essential oils, which can further increase your need for lipid content, which can further impact stability of different products. Now is a really good time to talk about safety. So you could see they had some big usage rates in some products. Natural does not mean safe. Okay, consumers will think that. They're allowed to. We as formulators, or those of you who are marketing people, cannot just assume natural means safe. There are limits too. So some essential oils have active principles that can affect pregnant women. Now, this hasn't been tested and recorded very well because pregnant women don't really want to expose themselves to proper test conditions to find out the hard way if it affects their unborn baby, which means we can only rely on empirical evidence. And here I've listed some of the common materials where they have empirical evidence to suggest these materials need to be used with caution. But be very careful for that type of target market when using essential oils. It does not mean they're safe. And then some essential oils are affected by sunlight. Key examples, lime and bergamot. Again, you see these products in leave-on products, but then consumers go out, expose themselves to the sun, and they get these big blotchy marks on their skin. Okay, so don't assume they're safe. I'll tell you where to go in a moment to find some limits that will help you formulate within safe and regulatory guidelines. And the regulatory guidelines are set to help ensure safety. So again, don't just assume it's safe because it's natural. Now, in the EU, they have a list of allergens. I have a list here. It's in their regulations. Leave-on products with more than 0.001% or rinse-off products with greater than 0.01% of substances listed in Annex 3, entries 67 to 92, must be listed on the label. This is why on labels with essential oils or even fragrances, you'll see at the very end they tend to list certain, like, you know, what have we got? Limonene, camphor, cinnamol, citral, eugenol. I've got a whole list here, but that's why you see those materials at the end of an ingredient list for a product that goes to EU. You need to list this too with your essential oils. Now, you need to ask your supplier to provide you with an allergens list. They'll provide you with percentage inputs you need to calculate out based on the exact amount of material you have in your formula, how much of these allergens are present, and ensure they're listed on the label if they are present at greater than 0.01% for a rinse-off product or greater than 0.001% for a leave-on product. Allergens are typically found in most essential oils. So again, just because they're natural doesn't mean they're safe. You need the SDS to see the percentage present and then must list them on the label. So where can you go to also find other regulatory limits? Okay, some of the favourite places. Cosing. So EU cosing. Who's used cosing before? Yep. Fantastic place to find limits. And the other really great place to search for limits is the Australian TGA SUSMP. Now, if you've ever tried to search in the TGA SUSMP, it's kind of frustrating and very difficult to read, but it's a fantastic place to look for limits. You need to be prepared. So with COSING, very easy to search. You can search using the INCI or the CAS number, and you'll get your result. With the TGA, you need to check. You need to use botanical name, common name, chemical name, and you might get your hit that way. But these are the two best sources to get limits. Now, I know neither of these may be relevant here, for example, but if you're formulating or blending with essential oils, my strong advice is you search both of these sources because they will give you the limits of safety. Now, a lot of times these two countries agree. The other place is the IFRA handbook. So if you're searching through the IFRA handbook, again, really good place to search for limits. You will generally find these three sources will agree on limits. And again, my strongest recommendation to you is to search all three sources, and that will help ensure you're within regulatory guidelines, but safety. So when you're first formulating with essential oils, you might get conflicting information from essential oil textbooks about safety. If you go to these three sources, you will get a very clear picture of what these, so regulatory authorities and the IFRA handbook recommends as safe limits, and that gives you excellent guidance. That's my strongest recommendation I can give you. Use those sources, even if you think, oh, TGA is not relevant to me. It's a fantastic source for a limit, which will help ensure your consumers' safety, and that's the more important part. Okay, other considerations, as if I haven't given you enough to think about. Botanical names, you need to be specific. So let's have a look at some examples. Chamomiles, there is German or blue chamomile, Matricaria recutita, Maroc, or Mensis multicollis, and Roman chamomile, Anthemis nobilis. Very different plants. So when you're writing up a formula, or marketing people, when you're writing that you would like chamomile in your formula, please be a little bit more specific. okay? Because they all smell completely different and have very different pricing as well, I might add. You need to be specific about the plant part, okay, because that also impacts. So for example, bitter orange, Citrus aurantium amara, botanical name. Bitter orange oil comes from the peel. Neroli is the blossom of the bitter orange tree, same botanical name, different plant part. And petitgrain is the leaves and twigs of the bitter orange. So 3 different essential oils, 1 botanical name, 3 different plant parts, okay? Am I making this too complicated? I hope I'm not painting too much of a depressing picture. I mean, it can be fun, but just I want you to be aware of these things. Don't go in thinking, oh, yeah, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, stir it up, I'm done, because it is not that at all. Okay, adulteration. Now, I spoke about this earlier. Be aware. How natural is natural? Speak with your supplier. Are you buying a nature identical essential oil? Are you buying a natural but plant essential oil, or are you buying 100% essential oil? Be aware of it. Ask the question. You will have seasonal variations. As I mentioned, that lavender profile, I use that as an example. Even within that profile, seasonal variations can give you a significant difference in aroma. Distillation methods. So you can get Lang Lang Extra. That's the first 1 to 2 hours of distilling, and that's what's usually used in perfumery. It's the best. Then you have Lang Lang 1. That's the next 2.5 hours of distilling. Lang Lang 2, the next 3 to 4 hours. Lang Lang 3, it's the last 2 hours. You have Lang Lang Complete. They finish their distilling and they put it all back together. Okay? So again, you need to be specific. If you're asking for essential oils, be specific what you're asking for. If you're writing up a formula with essential oils, be specific in what you write up. Be aware of oxidation. More so, protect against it in your finished product. Your essential oils stored correctly will generally be okay when they're 100% essential oils. When you start to, we need to put them under a nitrogen blanket if you're not using the full container. When you put it into a product, you can start to get degradation. Extra input is required. I've mentioned this a few times. It impacts stability and cost and substantivity. And again, the bottom line can be affected significantly, especially different yields, different batches. So hopefully now some of those oils have made their way around the room. The men's product, you've probably all pulled some faces. I've seen a few. You can see it's really pungent, but hopefully, especially with the men's product, you saw just how much it altered from the starting material in a blend, in a finished product. That was the main point of showing you that one, as well as some of the aroma limitations. If you do have any questions, please come and see me outside. If you'd like a copy, I know there was a lot of detail on the screen. If you'd like a copy, please give me your name card. I'm happy to email it out to you. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation and learned at least a couple of things out of this presentation today. Don't be put off by the complexities of blending and formulating with essential oils, but be aware the challenges are there and make it a fun challenge to overcome. Thank you very much. Oh, and don't forget my lab session today, solving formulation issues. I'm working with emulsifiers today. We're not going to make just one product, we're going to make 2. And anyone who made it to yesterday's lab session, you know just how much fun I had. We're going to have even more fun today. 2:30 at the lab, we're going to pack the room, come along. We're just going to have a lot of fun playing with emulsifiers. Thank you.